So how does one woman, with no college degree, just a notebook and a pair of binoculars, end up challenging centuries of scientific belief? How did she force us to completely rethink what it even means to be human? Well, we're going to get right into that incredible story. You're looking at the signature of Jane Goodall. And her work, well, it wasn't just groundbreaking, it sent absolute shockwaves through the scientific world. And it forever changed how we see the animal kingdom and, really, our place in it. And this is a telegram from her mentor, the famous paleontologist Louis Leakey. This one single, urgent message says it all. It captures the huge, seismic impact of what she was discovering. With just one observation, she shook the very foundations of what we thought we knew about ourselves. Now, to really get how big of a deal this was, you have to rewind to the 1950s. Back then, science had built this thick, unbreakable wall between humans and animals. We were special. We were unique. And they were just animals. This right here really lays it all out. On one side, you have the old belief. Animals are basically robots. They don't have feelings, and scientists should keep their distance, assigning them numbers, not names. And of course, only humans made tools. Then Jane comes along and just shatters that entire paradigm. She saw them as individuals, with real personalities and emotions, and she saw them making tools. It was a complete revolution. So, who was this person who dared to rewrite our own story? She wasn't some tenured professor from a fancy university. In fact, she started out as a secretary who just had this incredible passion for Africa. And from there, she started to chip away at that wall. Her path was just completely unconventional. She gets to Africa in '57, starts her research in 1960, and then in 1962, she does something almost unheard of. She gets into a PhD program at Cambridge University, as one of the very few people ever allowed to do that without a bachelor's degree. She was a true rebel, breaking every single rule. And what's wild is that her greatest crime, at least in the eyes of the scientific establishment, was something called anthropomorphism. Basically, they accused her of projecting human feelings onto animals. But here's the thing, that supposed sin was actually the key that unlocked her most profound discoveries. And this shows you her method perfectly. She wasn't studying subject number 7. No, she was studying David Greybeard and Flo and Goliath. By giving them names, she wasn't just being sentimental. She was recognizing them as distinct individuals. And that allowed her to map out their entire complex society, their alliances, their rivalries, their family dramas. Then came the big one, the bombshell, the observation that led to that famous telegram. She watched a chimp, it was David Greybeard, in fact, not just use an object, but make a tool. He deliberately stripped the leaves off a twig so he could use it to fish for termites. That simple act completely destroyed the long-held definition of humanity as man the toolmaker. And the revelations just kept coming. She recorded behaviors that were so familiar to us. Hugs, kisses, a comforting pat on the back, even tickling. These weren't just random actions. This was proof of deep, supportive, emotional bonds, relationships that could last a lifetime. That line between us and them was getting blurrier every single day. But the story isn't all hugs and kisses. As her research went on, things got a lot more complicated. Jane uncovered a much more unsettling truth, that chimpanzees weren't just gentle creatures. They could mirror the darkest parts of human nature, too. You can feel the shock in her own words right here. The peaceful, idyllic picture of the chimpanzees was shattered. She had to face the fact that they, just like us, had a real capacity for brutality. And the evidence, wow, it was just undeniable. She saw organized hunting parties, she witnessed infanticide where chimps would kill the young of their rivals, she even saw cannibalism, and then, maybe most shocking of all, she documented the Gombe Chimpanzee War, a brutal, 4-year-long conflict between two different groups. Things like warfare, which we always thought were uniquely human, they weren't. So this deep, complex, and sometimes dark understanding of chimpanzees eventually pushed her to leave the forest. Her role was about to change in a huge way, from a scientist to a global activist. The turning point really came at a conference in 1986. She was sitting there listening to report after report about how chimpanzee populations were just plummeting across Africa. And in that moment, she realized she couldn't just sit back and observe anymore. She had to do something. She had to act. And act she did. Just wrap your head around this number. 300. That's how many days a year she started traveling. She basically gave up her quiet life in the field for a non-stop schedule of speeches and meetings, fighting for conservation. It's just staggering commitment.
And she built a whole movement, really from the ground up. First, she founded the Jane Goodall Institute to keep the research and conservation work going. And then, in 1991, she started Roots and Shoots with just 12 teenagers on her back porch, a program to empower young people to make a change.
Her work became this powerful voice for the voiceless, and her focus just kept expanding, from chimpanzees to protecting their habitats, to fighting for the ethical treatment of all animals, and even taking on massive issues like global climate change. So, at the end of the day, what is the lasting impact of this one-time secretary from London? Well, it's an absolutely immense legacy of science, conservation, and maybe, most importantly, of hope.
And this gives you a little taste of the scale we're talking about. The Jane Goodall Institute has offices all over the world, and that tiny little group that started on her porch, it's exploded into over 10,000 Roots and Shoots groups in more than 100 countries. It's incredible.
And of course, the world has taken notice. Her contributions have been recognized with some of the highest honors on the planet. I mean, she was made a Dame by the Queen, she's a UN Messenger of Peace, and she's even received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Her impact is just undeniable.
But her influence goes way beyond science and politics. She became a true cultural icon, so much so that she ended up in a classic Far Side cartoon. In it, one chimp finds a blonde hair on another and says, "Conducting a little more research with that Jane Goodall tramp?"
And what I absolutely love about this story is her reaction. Apparently, her institute was horrified. They thought it was an insult. But Jane, she thought it was hilarious. It just perfectly captures her humility and her great sense of humor, and shows how she was breaking down barriers everywhere, not just in science.
Ultimately, Jane Goodall's legacy is all about questioning our assumptions. She taught us to look closer, to have more empathy, and to see the deep connections we share with the world. And that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. If she proved that such a fundamental, centuries-old belief was wrong, what else are we completely wrong about today?